Hello, welcome to Building Renaissance Leaders. I'm your host, Victor Vogel. Tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about trust and interpersonal communications impact or effect on trust. So I thought I'd let you know that this evening, and hopefully we are going live on YouTube as well as LinkedIn. I have to take a look and see if that's the case. Um, I'm not quite sure if we are on LinkedIn yet or not. Let me jump over here and take a look and see. I'm trying to get ourselves lined up first here. I always have so much trouble going onto LinkedIn, so I stay strictly with YouTube and cannot see that we are on LinkedIn yet, but we're not, well, we're due to be there right now. So let's see if that's the case. Well, it does look like we're on live. Okay. All right. Just had to make sure of that before we got going. Uh, Let me do one more thing here. I want to get my comments section up here. Okay, I think I have everything set up. We'll wait to see here if we have a couple people join us or not. Um, Announce this for about a week. I don't get too much response out of YouTube. Out of LinkedIn from that standpoint. So, uh, if you're on here, you kind of let me know what state you're from or what country you're from. But let me go ahead and sort of get some preliminary stuff out of the way here. Um, First of all, I'd like to mention a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about this evening is in these four books. The one book at the top left is Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. It's literally a review of what I believe we need to be shifting our leadership paradigm to fairly quickly if we're going to be effective at all in the next decade. And I'm not going to go over that. That's all in the book. You can look at it if you decide to get it. And it covers what I mean by the paradigm shift and why I call it the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. Odyssey is really just a travel term, a Greek travel term, but it's more than just travel. It's an exciting adventure kind of deal. So, of course, we're talking about leadership, and Renaissance is indicative of a new change of what we're going to embark upon, or what we should be embarking upon if we're going to make some difference. We've stayed in the same leadership paradigm for the last 4 decades, and Gallup has showed not much change in things like employee engagement and satisfaction with leadership and satisfaction with organization, and people moving from company to company trying to find that ideal culture. And good luck with that, because there's not many of them out there under the existing paradigm that are you're seeking in terms of what we at least see streaming on social media about what we want in an organization. Um, we've been spending about $160 billion a year on leadership development, and we're not making much progress. So that's what the paradigm shift is about. The other book there, just to the right of that, is the Interpersonal Communication Leadership Course Workbook. That is the textbook I wrote and we use for my 12-week, 1 day a week, 2 hours in the evening, for a total of 24 hours of being immersed in interpersonal communication. Um, when I say that, and what I'm explaining in this podcast and the previous ones and the ones to come, and um, as a leader and a consultant, I worked with corporations for almost 40 years, and during that period of time, I trained a lot of leaders, and I changed a lot of corporate cultures at a high level. And what I discovered through that is there are about 12 basic skills leaders tend to use day in and day out, or at least weekly. And I took those 12 skills over the years, and I've kind of written down what assessments have said we need to do to change, what employees in those assessments, tens of thousands of them, has said that we need to correct, what they'd like their leaders to do better. And out of most of that came communication, behaviors. Um, and what I kind of discovered was we haven't trained a lot of people to be effective at interpersonal communication, but communication in general. We just don't teach it in high school, or you can literally get out of college and not take a course in it. And we wonder why our assessments are telling us we are where we are. So it struck me over the years as I was making changes that basically I was teaching people how to interpersonally communicate using the specific skill sets of interpersonal communication that were needed for each appropriate leadership skill you were applying at the time. For example, if someone needed to solve a conflict, then there's certain communication principles and concepts you use to do that. If a leader is trying to inspire and create trust within their employees, then there's a certain communication pattern for that. A certain set of processes we use. They come out of all of the same processes, but they are certainly, the communication patterns are different for different skill sets. So as I discovered this, I just laid out an educational plan that, as I was dealing with a particular skill set, I was training them in interpersonal communication processes and skills that were used to implement effectively those leadership skill sets. I was doing that on an ongoing basis. So what this course does is it takes those 12 skill sets and we talk about all of those. And so that's kind of what I'm explaining in these processes. The other book there, The Power of Effective Interpersonal Communication, is really for it's a blueprint of communications you need to get a hold of if you're a small business owner. It would work for corporations. It'll actually work for you personally and your household for that matter, and the things that you do in your personal life. But it's almost kind of like a checklist format, but it is a lot of information that you can go to and learn about how to apply leadership if you've never had leadership development training, or if you got out of business school, or if you happen to be a mom and pop operation where you had a great barbecue and you set up a restaurant, now you're into 7 restaurants, but you never had time or the ability or the money to hire consultants, etc., to come in and train you on leadership skills or communication skills. The other one has to do with what I believe is going on today, and that is we're trying to navigate conversations around people, but we haven't been taught how to communicate. So we're struggling with that as a society and as businesses in general. We have debates between people at remote and on site and remote work. We have union issues in companies, and employees are not engaged in their work. They're quiet quitting. We're having all of those things going on. Those are and we're not able to get our arms around that, and that has a lot to do because right now you don't have to have empathy, you don't have to have emotional intelligence to be successful. There's a lot of companies out there that are proving that on an ongoing basis. um, However, you don't have a comfortable smooth sailing organization, and people are beginning to realize that and rebel against it. That's what this book is about. It's about managing conversations or navigating those conversations and bringing them to a more positive result. And it's sort of the intersection of interpersonal communication and emotional intelligence. And you find that you can't have one without the other. You certainly cannot have emotional intelligence at all without interpersonal communication. We're going to find out about trust this evening. But you also can't have uh, other. You can't have interpersonal communication that's effective without understanding the psychology and dynamics of emotional intelligence and other aspects of psychology. So that's what those books are about. You can put your phone on that QR code there and put it on photo, and it'll give you a link. You can go there. These books are for sale there. Now, I put them there simply, I didn't want to put them on Amazon or Apple or any of those other places where you sell millions of copies. It's amazing. Well, I don't sell millions of copies anyway. I don't know many people that have. There's just a few. Uh, but this way, you actually get the link to the book, so you can bookmark that link, and these books will be available to you on your smartphone wherever you are anytime you need them. If you have a difficult discussion, you can't remember all the kinds of things you need to be thinking about before you go into that difficult discussion, then you can get on your phone and go to either the workbook or the Power of Effective Interpersonal Communication book, and kind of go to those chapters, look that up, and refresh your memory, and then plan your discussion before you go into it. So it's there to help you. It's there to help you. Um, so that I call I call this a digital reference repository because I had to think of some sort of technical term and change the name because library just sounds so 1970ish, you know. You got to keep up with the times. So I named it the Digital Reference Repository. That's where you can go. And along with those books, you can also tap into my Building Renaissance Leadership um, YouTube channel, and all these YouTubes will be available to you to go back to. Some of which, and most of them are timestamps. So if you have something about one of them you need to look at, you can go down specifically to the area you're searching for. You don't have to search through the whole thing. I try to do that as accurately as possible. So that's I wanted you to be aware those were available. There is a deal until December 31st, and then I'm going to take it off, and um, I might run it again next year in December. But I ran it this year because we have a real mess going on right now in our country, and people are at each other's throats, and they don't know how to unify. They don't know how to regain relationships and connections to people they've loved all their life and friends they've had all their life, and they're letting this politics get in the way of all of that. When in reality they probably don't have a lot of influence over any of that. So I don't know why they're arguing much about it, but um, this course, the interpersonal communication leadership course, is very applicable to your personal life, because even in your personal life you have organizations. It might just be your family, then you add your in-laws to it, then you add your cousins and brothers and sisters and uncles, and that organization gets to be pretty big, and it has a hierarchical, generally a leadership uh, uh, structure to it. Also, you have that in your church. You have that with your friends. I'm guessing if you sit around, one of my big deals one time was to try to figure out if girls' night out has any kind of hierarchical structure. You get 6 or 8 girls, and they go out and they're friends, and they talk, and they have dinner, and they have a lot of fun. And I actually asked to join one group one evening in this restaurant I used to frequent a lot of in Michigan. And I was asking them, is there someone who's really kind of like the informal group leader that have, and turns out there are, and at least in that group, and I would think probably most of them. So the kinds of things we talk about for leadership, and the things we talk about in general in communication, are really kind of applicable to your personal life when you go that way. This evening, um, I want to talk about the role and the importance of interpersonal communication in building trust. Do you think we have a trust problem in our country now? We have a trust problem amongst each other. We have a trust problem in our country. It's deep seated right now. It's really pretty bad. Um, and so, what I'm doing in this course, or in this series of podcasts, is sort of, I'm not teaching the course that I teach, and that's a 2 hour course, maybe longer, and there's exercises to go with it. So you wouldn't get as much out of just laying out the game. But I present some of the pieces of the course to kind of let you know what they're generally, there's an idea of what's going on. And normally it's like if I were teaching the course, it's probably the first 15 or 20 minutes of the course where I tell you about whatever topic area we're covering. Tonight it's trust, so we're going to look at trust a little bit. Then we have a lot of discussion about how to use interpersonal communication with trust. You have to excuse me. I've had allergies here for seems to be like 2 weeks now here in Oklahoma. So I may need to take some water. If you see me shaking when I take the water, that's because I'm have an affliction called essential shaking. It's genetic. It comes when you get older. Gee, I didn't have a choice. And so I don't worry about it, but some people I don't know. Sometimes it bothers them if they don't know what's going on. It's nothing life threatening per se. It's just one of those things that's aggravating. When you try to drink some water, you might put more on myself sometimes than I do in my mouth. But anyway, let's go back to trust. So, what I like to do is just kind of jump over to the trust category here, and the program I've been teaching for years and years and years and years is building trust through effective communication. And so, in that process, we try to figure out what's involved in trust, and we're going to try to get a handle on the communication side of it, and we're going to try to get a handle on sort of what is trust. I don't know if people think about it very much. Um, so, uh, uh, in the previous couple podcasts I've done, I've used this little model here, and I always like to refresh people, and then people who maybe haven't looked at this program before. When I talk about interpersonal communication, I talk about it as a closed system. And it has components, just like every other system has components. Your body is a system. It's a closed system. It has components. It has heart, liver, brain, and the nervous system, all the neurons that are attached to all the parts of your body for that, your heart, your lungs, kidneys, liver, everything has a function. All these organs have functions. You have senses that you use when you're communicating. You have your ears for auditory, smell, taste, touch, and of course your eyes. And so, as a body, you have a system like that. Interpersonal communication is very much like a system. In this case, this lady has a problem that she has to solve. She's the director of operations. She needs to get the vice president of international marketing that lives in Saudi Arabia to change a marketing plan because he didn't touch base with her when he sold it to the senior executives. She's not sure she can deliver his objectives. Anyway, if you really want to know the whole gist of that story and what it's all about, you can find that in the first podcast I did in this series called Small Business Coffee Chats, I think. And but I'm going to work you through just so you have a refreshment of the model, and those that haven't seen it, you can understand. So this lady has a message that she needs to create, and she needs to think about what she's going to say to this guy, and she creates her message, and her whole background, her whole culture, and her whole upbringing is part of what she uh, is putting into the design of this message. Um, and the guy that she needs to talk to is from Saudi Arabia. He's a young Harvard MBA graduate, vice president of international marketing. Like I said, she's director of operations, worked her way up the company. She's a high school graduate. She considers herself equal income provider for a lot of people like that. So um, this is part of what we see in this process of communication is there's some potential for barriers here, issues that can get in the way of effective communication. Now, that picture on the left, if you notice, some of you may not recognize some of that equipment that's in there. That's the thing on the desk is known as a telephone. You used to have to pick it up, put it to your ear, dial the number, put your fingers in little holes, and dial the numbers. Um, so if you're of a certain generation, you may have never seen one of these before in your whole life. The other thing that's on the desk there is called a typewriter. You type on the keys. It takes an arm, sends it up, hits a ribbon, an ink ribbon, and puts the letter on the paper So I have to explain these sometimes because there are literally people who do not know what those things were and may have never ever seen those. I don't think my granddaughter's ever seen a typewriter or a telephone in real life. Anyway, they may have seen them in the movies or something. But anyway, I put that on there for a purpose because she had to decide how she's going to contact Ali here. He's in Saudi Arabia. She could have flown over there and gone to his office, sat down and talked to him right there in his office and had a face to face personal conversation. A tad expensive for a 45-minute conversation. So she decided to pick up her phone and call him. Now, what she's doing is sending a signal, and this is the second portion of this version. The first portion didn't have some of this stuff like the wording in it. Uh, this is the second version we did, showing how we updated her because she's sending a verbal signal to him, a language, words, voice, that kind of stuff, directly over to Ali via the telephone. If we didn't upgrade her like we are doing right here with a system for video conferencing, she wouldn't have any nonverbal communication, none whatsoever. So all she would have is voice. And we know that nonverbal communication accounts for about 80% of what people attach meaning to. And we went into some detail, even talking about some neuroscience that supports that. That we've discovered over the last 4 or 5 years that tells us why nonverbal communication is so critical to the communication process. So this is the general processes. Something happens, you need to design a message to say something to somebody else. It could be you want to influence them, it could be you want to educate them, it could be a lot of things. It could be a discussion, just sharing information, or it could be a dialogue where you're actually trying to educate somebody in that discussion. When you attach video conference to it, kind of like I'm conferencing to you have the potential for a two-way conversation with nonverbal communication. Now, that's not everything about nonverbal communication. It just provides you some visual perspectives that's really kind of restricted to the screen. And so it's not the perfect nonverbal solution, but in today's time, it is a better solution than the telephone that she was going to use. Now, what happens here, she's created this message that she was sent to him to kind of start the conversation about how she needs his help uh, to see how she can get her people to uh, do the work that's necessary to deliver his marketing plan. And of course, he had no idea that she was struggling with this. So this is the first conversation. So the initial conversation, she was just saying, hey, you need to change your marketing plan. And of course, being a Saudi Arabian male, that didn't set well with him as a female, particularly a female with a high school education and some sort of authority position organization, but not at the level he is, trying to tell him he needed to change his marketing plan. So that could have been a disaster had we allowed that to happen. This is an actual event that happened that I consulted with years ago. But anyway, he receives the message and he receives her message and he hears the message, but he is interpreting that message from his culture, from his perspective. And before we had the video conferencing, all he had was her words and her tone of voice, maybe some inflection, tone, pitch, rate, those kinds of things of how the verbal message was delivered to draw some inference about what she was saying, some attitude towards that what she was saying. So he's kind of got this in his mind. Now, if we stopped right here, if this was the conversation, and by the way, this could be the conversation in today's world where we're using um, text messages, where we're using just video like we're using now. That's not really two-way video. It could be asynchronous. You may not even get this message ever, or you may get it 4 weeks from now and make a comment about it. And I have to go back and remember what you're making a comment about. Uh, it's a very somewhat less than perfect way of communicating with people. That's for sure. But at least on the phone, we do have some potential for him to create a message based on what he heard, what he interpreted, what she said. Something to keep in mind here that I emphasize normally at this point, and that is there's an axiom I tell people you need to really just grab a hold of when you're talking to other people, and that is the meaning of your message that you send someone will always reside in the mind of the receiver, the person who you sent that message to. And so you need to understand that the way that person's interpreting it, that's where the meaning of the initial message is going to be. So, what he does here is he's created this message and he has sent it back to Carmen. Ali sent a message back to Carmen. And he's using the same um, exact system. I just didn't put the screen down here, but you have nonverbal potential because he's using the video conferencing on his phone with her, so he can see her while he's talking to her. So that's a real benefit. So now we have the completion of the loop. This is where a lot of people are teaching communication. They're focusing on this second part, which we call feedback. And in there is all the active listening course. You know, you get courses on active listening and how to active listen, the importance of feedback. Most of the people who teach communication courses that are out there, I see, they're teaching this part of it more than they are the other part. In other words, you should take on important conversations. You should sit down, find out what you can find out about the person that you're going to be communicating with, and then develop your message in a way that is going to be conducive for that person accepting the message. And if there are barriers in the way, like education or culture or things like that, you want to try to minimize those barriers in your message when you're creating it, so that you don't have to continually continue this loop. So when she gets the feedback from him, and in this case, he's saying, so what are some of those issues? So he's accepted the idea that maybe I didn't talk to her about, so maybe there's some things I need to hear. And what she really said in the total message was, Ali, I need your help in trying to figure out how to hit your marketing plan. It's a good plan. I think it's great for the company, but I don't know that our people can do this, because here are some of the things. I have some things here that could really get in the way of this, and I need your help to help me see how we can do this. So she pitched this as needing help as opposed to telling him that he needs his plan, which really played into some of the barriers. It reduced his tension about her being a female, telling him, a male in Saudi Arabia, and someone with lesser education, that he needs to change his plan. She's asking for help. That really plays into him. Consequently, he's now open enough to hear what she has to say. The way she was going to state it before would have shut him down on the spot, and we would have had conflict as opposed to collaboration potential here. And so when she gets this feedback, this is where active listening comes into play. You really want to hear what he's saying, and you want to see if he's open to it. You want to know what his mood, his attitude is. In other words, you want to try to become synchronized with him, and synchronize more so in what we call the right brain, the openness, the creativeness, the innovativeness side of things, as opposed to, say, the left brain, which is normally associated with logic and defensive attitudes and shutting things down, etc. Um, so in this case, this is the process. This is all that's going on. This is going on day in and day out with people multiple times a day, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of times a day. This process is engaged. It's engaged. And there are components to it that are critical, places that can get in the way of effectively delivering your message to prevent misinformation, disinformation, and even, frankly, propaganda. propaganda. So uh, you have a message, you have a delivery system, you have a receiver who then becomes the sender and sends a message back, and the previous sender becomes a receiver and listens. If there's something that's at odds or at variance with the message, you loop this again. You ask another question, or you restate it in a different way, or you add information to it, or whatever it is to help him understand better what you're trying to get him to believe until you come to common understanding and meaning on the message. Now, the barriers that can get in the way, if your nonverbal signal is saying something different than your verbal signal. In other words, if you say something like yes, that's a conflicting signal. It's a barrier to him understanding what you're saying to start with. So you not only do you have to decide what you're going to say, you have to decide on all the things that can get in the way that can minimize that message being misunderstood or not understood or not even received at all. There are cases I've had, I don't know, so many I can't count them, where people are telling me they have a problem with their boss. It's a communication problem. I ask them why, and it's a frequency problem. They never come around. I said, well, how do you get your instructions? Text message, email. Well, are they clear? Are they concise? Well, there's a lot of questions I have. They say do this, and they're assuming I know this, and this, and we're not sure we know this, and this because we haven't heard that from him before, and so we try to text back and maybe we don't get an answer to the text, or maybe he gets really upset that we even texted, so that even makes us hesitant about texting. So these are the kinds of dialogues I get when I talk to employees about what are the problems that get in the way of leadership from a communication standpoint. So I thought it would be necessary just to kind of recap that a little bit. But keep this in mind. Messaging, receiving of messages, nonverbal cues that are congruent and not congruent, all kinds of barriers, cultural, psychological, educational, political. Then you have those are the internal barriers, and the external barriers. You could be equipment problems, or information flow problems, or organizational policies, procedure problems, things you really don't have control over personally that get in the way. All of these things can cloud and mess up messages that you think are absolutely clear when you send them. And we're now getting into the phase where people are firing people with text messages. They're not even bringing the person in, sitting down and discussing the issue with them. They just send them a text message, pack your stuff up, security will be down to, escort you out the door. And a lot of people are doing that because they don't have to deal with the face to face discussion and the face to face things that you're going to see non-verbally that you feel you don't want to see. They're just, they're uncomfortable to you. I've seen this in a lot of situations that are coming up. So, uh, So here's a brief recap of what happens. The meaning of the message resides in the mind of the receiver. Always remember that when you start to create, to send a message or to say something to somebody. Now, do you need to do it all the time? No, no, no. Probably 75, 80% of the time you're not into that kind of thing. But where we find the things that disrupt people to make them dislike uh, supervisors or dislike the organization, and frustrate them are the things that are important kinds of things that impact their performance or impact them personally. These are critical things, and sometimes bosses don't think through what some of those things are, and they may not think they're critical, but they are to the employee. And I usually find that out when employees don't. They're around, they don't see their boss enough. There's not enough frequency of interaction for them to know. So keep this in mind when you have an important message to send to somebody and you take the time to plan it out. And remember, the meaning of the message always resides in the mind of the receiver. Feedback is the breakfast of champions when it comes to communication. You want to make sure you close the loop on all your communication. It's sort of a double check. Now, if you do a really great job, um, you might just get a gotcha, I got it. And you go, can you give me an idea what you have? Yeah, you said to do this. Okay, great, we're done. That's a quick discussion. But if you don't get that kind of feedback, then you want to make sure you come back and reinitiate another message that further clarifies it until you have good, clear understanding the message is complete. A lot of people don't do that today. They're in a hurry. Everything's got to be 5 and 10 seconds long today. Sometimes discussions take longer, folks. The most important tool in your communication toolbox is active listening. Now, I'm a big fan of active listening, and it is exceptionally important. It's probably one of the most important, it may even be the most important aspect outside of designing the correct message to start with. Active listening is a very important message. But when we teach active listening, we don't teach it in an effective way. And by that, I mean we're not talking about some of the psychology behind that also, and that is why active listening is important. How is it we tend to connect with people and become, when is it we become truly active listening? And I tell people it's more than telling people or citing to somebody, gee, you seem upset, you're angry. I can tell you're frustrated. Now that tells a person that I'm hearing that they're angry, but it doesn't tell them how I feel. I have the intense desire when I'm talking to people to feel that emotion, not just to hear it, not just to hear it and be able to say what it is. I want to physically feel it in my body the same way they do. I want them to create in me in our discussion that point that makes me remember how I felt when that happened to me. And I literally can, when I'm having this discussion and I'm trying to have this discussion with people, I'm trying to connect with their right side of the brain to my right side of the brain so that I can feel that emotion. I once had a lady on a flight to Amsterdam. We were talking. I said, what is the most important thing that you need to hear that really makes you feel like what you're hearing from me would be sincere. And she said, it's really simple. Don't just hear what I told you, feel what I told you. And she instinctively understood the psychology about connecting when it comes to active listening. There is a connection you need to have, and it is more than just a verbal exchange. It is a nonverbal exchange that brings the emotion into you so that you can feel that. Now, if they're really upset and everything, you're not going to get really upset and start shouting back. But you want to feel that upset that they have, that you want to feel that emotion so that you can then learn how to regulate. That's what this is all about. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to regulate the other person's behavior and take them where you need them to be. And so that might be lowering your voice and talking calmly so that they begin to calm down. There is a whole set of neuroscience and auditory neuroscience that says that if you talk in the lower tones and you talk calmly, that tends to calm people down. There's actual physical science evidence of that, as opposed to getting excited or raising your voice or things like that. So those are some important things I want you to understand about when you're taking an active listening course. If you're not getting something like that, you need to go to some courses that are going to talk about that and show you and give you some sense of what that feels like in the course. Some of the things that we try to do in the one I do. Plan your important or difficult message before initiating your communication. So we talked about that. Uh, what I need you to understand, and the question I have for you, if you're out there, if you're on LinkedIn, I can't for some reason. You if you text me and chat with me and let me know you're here and ask a question, that's fine. If I'm not connected to you, I don't know. I've done everything I know to make that happen. Just hop over to Building Renaissance Leaders on YouTube, click on that live button, and you can come in here and chat with us. I've never had anybody have any problem when I've had people come on. I've never had anybody have any problem on YouTube. These courses here, are all short notice, so I'm really counting on people look at them after and they do after the process versus right now during the process. But if you were on here, the question I would be asking you is, can you build trust without interpersonal communication? So if you're out there, say yes or no. Okay, so there's nobody on YouTube saying yes or no, and I don't know until somebody checks in with me from LinkedIn whether they're there. The answer is no, you can't have trust without interpersonal communication. It is a human interpersonal function. It requires two people or more to be engaged, to have some sense of building trust between people. Um, whether you trust yourself, I guess you could have a debate with yourself about that if you'd like. Go ahead. But I'm focusing on others. Can you build trust in other people without interpersonal communication? And the answer is no. You have to have that interpersonal interaction in order to determine what trust is. And so, just right off the bat, they're connected. So, interpersonal communication, I basically say it is the vehicle whereby you build trust with other people. All right, I'm getting somebody here on YouTube. Parimo Thacker, I believe. It is. So at least I know some people are watching on the YouTube side. So let me kind of go through this and then we'll come back to any questions. If you have questions, you need to put the Q in front of the question and go ahead and type out the question if you don't mind. Um, okay. So yeah, we pretty well arrived to the fact that I believe you can't have trust amongst people without interpersonal communication. Uh, and interpersonal communication doesn't have to be voice, it can be nonverbal, remember. So, uh, when we're talking about building trust, trust, if you just look at the basic Oxford definition of it, it's a firm belief in the reliability, the truth. Keep this in mind because that's a big deal today. The truth, the ability or strength of someone or something. So, when I look at someone and something, I look at those in terms of internal and external strength. So the internal trust in someone is self confidence, for example. You trust yourself enough to move forward on a project or something like that. Then you have external trust. That's you can almost think of that as something physical. If you slipped and fell over the edge of a cliff and one of your friends grabbed your arm and said, "Trust me, I'm going to pull you up." You have the strength of their arm. You know them. You know who they're about, and you focus on that. And so you let's see. Hold on 1 second here. Got a whole lot of alarms going off here on the phone for some reason. All right. So this is a scenario where you have physical strength. You trust you can feel the strength in their arm. You know their body composition. You know they're going to be able to pull you up. So you feel comfortable in that situation. So trust is that sense of strength or that sense of reliability and truth. And truth is important, I think, here. Not trust, you don't want to formulate trust on what something is said. You want to formulate trust on the truth of what is said. And ability has to do with trust and that, and we'll talk about some of those characteristics that you can see this definition and trust. So here's some things I'm pretty sure most of you know, but just to remind you of, one undeniable fact is trust is given, it can't be demanded. Trust has to be earned, it can't be commanded. So you can't force somebody to trust you. You can force them to tell you they trust you if you threaten them with something that can harm them and they feel like they need to feel comfortable with that. Is centered around that, but you can't be for sure that they actually trust you. Okay, um, that's something that's got to be earned. It's a two-way connection situation. That's why it's so important to have that synchronization of connection between people, and that you get in interpersonal communication. So what you really need to understand, there's a group out of Michigan State way back in 1959 that talked about power bases and that kind of stuff and did a lot of studies on people and found out that power, uh, there's a lot of different types of power. And the powers that are coercive and directive and commanding are not very good at establishing trust. Power doesn't equal trust. Just because you have power, suppose you are a manager in a position, you are over somebody, that doesn't mean that person you have that person's trust. It's that is not what trust is premised on. It can't be premised on that. And we'll see how certain other types of power, the more referent, referent being likable, approachable leaders, uh, the kind that are competent and those kinds of things that people look at and they go and they give you their trust because of that situation. So how does trust work? I've studied this for quite a while and talked with people like Gary Nessner, who heads up, he's an ex FBI head that headed up the hostage negotiation group pretty much the very beginning and still teaches a lot about that today. A lot of other people who are really good negotiators out there uh, it, that I've listened to and talked to. The interrogation stuff I've learned when I was in special forces with the PSYOP Warfare Center there in the military. Um, it really comes down to balance. Um, that there has to be some sort of balance between the two people. And let's just take two people to keep it simple. When you have two people, if you want to build trust, there has to be some sort of balance that these people premise their trust upon. Um, so um, I was trying to figure out what would be the regulators, kind of like a thermometer uh, or air conditioning thermometer unit, whatever, however you want to look at it. When you're at 98.6, things are humming pretty good. You feel good, things are okay, you're thinking good, you can do things that you normally should be able to do. Temperature hits about 101 to 102, everything kind of slows down and goes awry. You don't feel good, you're not thinking straight, your heart rate's up, your blood pressure's up, everything is not right. Your system in your body is not, it's dysfunctional. It's dysfunctional. If you go too far and become too cold, you have the same reaction. Your body is not the normal state, it is reacting in a dysfunctional state. So something regulates that keeps that in that middle range. So we kind of know some of the things in the body that do that, but the biggest regulator I've found between people is harm. When you can do more harm than others can do to you, you tend to take this from a power perspective, coercive power perspective, and you can threaten people with that harm, with the power and the position. You may be hearing about some of this on the news. I personally don't listen to news much anymore, but if you do, you may be perceiving some of this now. Uh, and there's this fight for who can be in control, and that control. This is kind of like the thermometer, the regulator of trust, whether you feel like you can trust. You normally are not trusting somebody that's coercive and has a lot of power and can harm you a great deal. You're waiting to see when they're going to just release all of that on you. And so you don't have the ability to harm them back. So your defensive posture is not very good either. So the way I kind of looked at that is like this: the teeter totter. Believe this, I saw this on the playground one time. And it made me think of trust. These two little girls are friends, okay? And the question was, when they both were on the ground, they had their feet on the ground, they were talking about teeter-tottering. It's going to be great. Let's have fun. It's kind of exciting to go up there and come back down, etc. And so the little girl in blue was the first one to push down and lift the little girl in the, I think that's yellow shirt, um, up in the air. And she's happy and she's excited and she's kind of holding her up in the air. And the little girl says, "Okay, you can let me down now." And the little girl in blue said, "Nah, I'm not going to do it." And she goes, "No, no, let me down." And she goes, "No, I'm not going to let you down." The girl goes, I'm scared. Let me down." So at this point, all of a sudden, what was a trusting relationship has been broken. And that little girl in the air was, contrary to her smile in this picture, she was anxious and afraid. And she didn't know. She, all of a sudden, this friend she knows that she trusted, all of a sudden, she doesn't trust her as much anymore. And then the girl let her down. And she sent the girl back up. And then the little girl in yellow got off the teeter totter. And the other girl says, "We're going to teeter totter some more." And she goes, "No, I don't think so." That little girl lost trust. And that other girl going to be fair about going up and down. And what happened here is that ability to harm. Now, this is a minor harm, okay? But that ability to harm was definitely an issue that destroyed trust. Now, this principle I was thinking is simple when you have a teeter totter. But when you carry it over into organizations, the same principle applies. On the right, we have the scale. It could be called scale. This isn't the scale of justice, but it could be. Uh, on the right, you have a situation where the leader has so much more power, so much more ability to control and harm the other person. You could also replace harm with control if you wanted, that's fine. But it is some sense of harm, some sense of threat that tends to control the trust. Uh, And it's normally that way in most situations. You have the employee that has less power or less authority over the leader. And if you think about organizations today, when they hire somebody in, when you're hired in, you immediately on the right side there. The leader has the title, they have the authority and control over your wages, your hours you work. Uh, they determine whether you get a raise. Uh, they determine which jobs you get. They control things that impact your life, like your survival state, paying your rent, paying for the kids' schooling, getting your health care, all that kind of stuff is dependent on this leader and their authority over you. And the leader comes built in the organization with that authority the day you sign into the company. And there's never really a normal balance of that in an organization. And we kind of wonder why employees look at leader don't have a good positive attitude about leadership. They're starting off in the hole. They start off in the hole. There's no trust in you, you know, until you earn that trust. And that's what leaders don't understand. They think because they have the power, they can command the trust, but they cannot. They cannot command that trust from an employee. That has to be earned by the leader. So they have to overcome these barriers that are in the way right here of the employee trust them. They have to figure out how to move it towards the left scale over there. How do you balance that harm, that threat, so to speak, so that the employee can perceive that your value and your importance as a leader is as rest as much in that employee's abilities and skills as the yours does and the leader's skills and importance in the organization. So importance, control, harm, threat, however you want to couch it, that is the thing that is regulating trust. And so in an organizational structure, a hierarchical organizational structure, you start off as an employee when you first come into company. You're starting off in a position where you're not sure what that leader's going to do or what they think about you, or you can't trust how they feel about you. They have not gained or earned your trust in that process. So therein lies the problem about trust in organizations. And I don't care if it's two people or if it's a department or if it's departments in an organization or if it's a state or if it's a government, the same thing. Nuclear negotiations are premised on this concept. You know, who has the biggest and baddest weapons? And and the people who have those weapons, do they trust each other? Can they really trust each other? You would almost think that maybe Europe, for example, could have trusted the United States, but we don't know that now. There's a whole thing going on where because of the incoming president, whether or not there's trust there anymore. And it was pretty well balanced. It was pretty well balanced for 4 years. We saw that. We saw that in all of the negotiations and the meetings and the sharing of information, etc. Now we have the European continent is where the employee is on the right hand side over there, up in the air, and they're not quite sure they can trust sharing information with us or trust us in general. What our attitude will be towards them. So the regulator of trust pretty much can be harmed. So I'm reading here. One question says about self-confidence in a close place. Not quite sure what you mean by that. If you could kind of type that out a little bit more or give me a little more detail about that. What is specifically is this a trust issue or is it a self-confidence issue with yourself? Because it'd be hard for me just to answer that question with that little bit of information. So one of the dilemmas about social media, it's kind of hard in short spurts to try to understand. So in other words, my feedback to you is I need you to give me a little more data before I can respond to your question, a little more detail. Uh, so back to our trust here. This is an issue that we as leaders have to grapple with. This is our responsibility to initiate because we have that authority. We can balance that. We can show the employee that they have more value than they may perceive they have. And when we do, that's when that scale begins to level off. May not level off 100% equal, I mean, zero equal, but it will be a much more balanced scale than it would be otherwise. So, how do you balance harm to build trust when you're the cause of the imbalance? um, Way back in early 1980s, I think. Warren Bennis wrote this book, Leaders. He's probably written 5 editions since then, but this was the copy I had that took a picture of here that has been consistent. I've used consistently. And Warren has a segment in his chapter, and I just wanted to let folks know that most of what I'm about to discuss with you, you can find in that chapter. I don't cite it 100% correctly, as is a paraphrasing to some extent, with a few things that I've learned since I read this book added into it. So, but the gist of it is pretty much coming from Warren Bennis's and Bert Nannis's book on leaders, which I highly recommend. Even today, I think it's a good read on leadership. Uh, so, uh, what we want to do is figure out how we balance this process. And one of the things that came out of French and Raven's study in the power bases, one of the things that's important is competence. Competence means that you, in fact, are competent in those skills that you need to be competent in, both functionally from a transactional leadership role, which is in marketing or HR or operations, and the leadership role itself, which is all about uh, your ability to inspire and lead other people, for them to want you to lead them, is a better way to put this. So, research has shown employees associated with leadership power, with knowledge and approachability, um, that competence is really, really important, and making people feel comfortable. And that's pretty. If you trust your brain surgeon because you think he's done enough of them that he knows what he's doing, and his education. You're trusting his education plus his continued education is keeping up with what it takes for him to do this work that you're doing. And that is especially true if you have no idea about that work. In other words, you have nothing within yourself to refute it one way or the other. Uh, the more you know, the more he can help you feel comfortable about her or his competence, the better you're going to feel comfortable in trusting this leader. Knowledge leaders are perceived as competent in all aspects of the position and often granted the power by employees. That last part is important. Granted power by employees. In other words, it's the employee that is going to the leader. It now it turns the process of communication in. The employee is seeking the leader's information. They are granting you that power. They're saying, yes, you know more than I do, and I need your help. That's an important aspect for leaders to grab a hold of. These are how you know you're turning the corner. Competence allows the leader to request unusual and above the call of duty behavior from employees. Uh, when you're trusted, when you inspire them, when they are inspired by you, is a better way to put it. They're ready. They're ready to join you. They're ready to be part of that, and they want to be part of that. A perceived lack of competence will cause employees in many cases to doubt leaders, which can lead to hesitation in job performance. So that's just the other side of that coin. But it is a real issue right now. This last statement is a real issue. This is what Gallup and Pew and Harvard and all these people, this is kind of what they're measuring. They're measuring why do people feel the way they do about this? And you're beginning to see some of this come out in some of this research. Consistency is important. Consistency focuses on being congruent when communicating living up to your commitments, behaving consistently, treating employees the same, ministering policies equally. And consistency builds trust because it allows employees to predict the leader. Predictability leads to credibility, which is critical for establishing and sustaining trust. So now, if you have somebody who's competent and they are consistent, whoa, you're feeling really comfortable with this person. That's going to make you feel comfortable in trusting them. And I had a leader one time that was just almost seemed like a tyrant. And I went in and was talking to the employees. I did the assessments and came out pretty coercive leader. And so I sat down with a group of the sort of informal leaders with those employees. And we went off site into a restaurant and had some coffee. And we were sitting there talking. I said, I'm sensing I need to recommend replacing this guy. So you guys been together a long time. I don't want to see you broken up. And they just jumped up and said, no, don't do that. And I said, what are you talking about? This guy is, I mean, everything this guy shows, he's kind of like a power based, one of those tough guys to deal with. And they said, no, he is consistent. We know exactly where it's coming. We can predict the next thing he's going to ask us to do and get it done before he does it. So we don't have to deal with much of that at all. And that just, stood me up. It shows me the power that you need to go in and make sure you ask before you find out what's going on with this stuff. But yeah, the guy was, they were comfortable with him. Now, if that ever reached a point, I think it would be a short fuse before they'd come tell somebody they needed help. Compassion requires a leader to be an active listener. It indicates to the employee a sense of concern and caring. When they show compassion towards employees, it makes the employee feel valued and wanted. And that's pretty much along the line of empathy and emotional intelligence. So you could probably bump that up to that. The need for leaders to have a strong capability of emotionally using emotional intelligence in a highly effective way. Um, and when that happens, so if you have somebody who's consistent, who's competent, and who's compassionate, and this last thing is actually congruity. It's being congruent. It's means your behavior reflects your statements. Actions associated with behaviors allow for predictability along with consistency. Leaders who don't have that can leave situations or incongruence can leave situations in chaos. It's where you see a lot of frustration and anger and people just leaving because they can't put up with it anymore. But when you have it, when you have those four things, when you have competence, consistency, uh, compassion, and congruity, you tend to have an extremely trusting environment. You have if you have a leader that possesses those things, most of the time they are not viewed as someone who is uh, well, they can be trusted more as a bit. This is where the trust is given to the leader. That's what I'm trying to say. It's you're authorized to lead because we trust you. That is what you strive for in those areas. And these are just basically a restatement of some of the same things we said before. So let me go back to this here. Uh, Oops, don't want to go to those. Sorry, that's that essential shaking. I hit more buttons than I intend to. So the most of this will be sort of in a summary that'll be in a blog on my website if you want to recap of it down the thing. But now, if we can ask some questions, if you have questions about the importance of interpersonal communication and trusting others, you can feel comfortable in typing that question out there because it is something we're not experiencing a great deal of today. Not experiencing a great deal of trust out there. And that's part of what is the divisiveness is about. And it's not just in government; it's also in corporations. You have the battles between on-site, off-site battles. You have union versus company is picking up. Um, these are things where employees are beginning to question these areas, and we're seeing if in most leadership assessments, we're not seeing the compassion, the congruency, the competency, the consistency in leaders. We're seeing people who are using those power-based coercion and threats. And I mean, when you send out an email and you give an employee no other choice, you're not being compassionate, congruent, consistent, and competent in leadership. You're creating the opposite point of view for that, and you're out of balance now. You have now told the employee, "I have the ability to threaten you by firing you if you don't show up to work." And yes, you do. And but wouldn't it be nicer? Wouldn't it be a real shocking positive experience for employees to really want to come to work, to really choose to come to work? What are you doing? What are those communication lines that are broken that don't allow you to have those discussions? Where is that happening? See, so that's why I'm saying interpersonal communication is so critical. I'm not seeing a lot of questions, so there's probably not a lot of people still here on this. There's not a lot of people using um, this sort of leadership style that engages through interpersonal communication, that thinks about the messages they need to send remote workers to start engaging in a conversation. Um, I don't even know if all the alternatives are ever laid on the table in a company for that. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is that I think the biggest problem we have is between organization and employees right now is trust. I think that's a big problem in society in general, but for organizations, it's a problem. We're seeing more conflict, more chaos, um, it's not getting healthier; it's getting more harmful. Just with the event of the United Healthcare executive is a prime example. These are things that happen over time when you don't start making the connections interpersonally with people. If you're not hearing, if you're not, in this case, for major corporations like healthcare corporations, they are not listening. They are not actively listening as a corporation to their customers, and they're not listening to their employees, most of them. And so it becomes a situation where um, unless we figure out a good way to begin to have interpersonal connections, the kind of connections uh, that allow you to have nonverbal interaction, that bring in the things like proximity, the closeness of individuals, so that you feel something. When you're standing 2 feet or 3 feet away from somebody, you're feeling you're feeling the emotions from their body. You're taking this in visually and auditorily and other ways, even smell. It plays a role in this in some cases when it's intimate discussions. So there are parts of interpersonal communication that we need to learn more about, like connecting. This idea of synchronizing right brain to right brain is not something that just fell out of the sky. It's not a chart, it's not a meme. It is evidence-based science that shows from the very time that a baby comes out of the womb and is held by its mother, the mother is regulating the baby's behavior and reacting to the baby's behavior right brain to right brain, because the left brain is not evolving in the baby until the latter part of the second or the third year of life is when the left brain begins to start even developing. So it's a right brain to right brain connection that mothers have with babies. And a lot of times, how we leaders tend to react to that comes from some of the background of how we were raised in this environment, or how we were raised as children in an environment way back in to 2 and 3 year old age. So much of this has to do with taking the time to discuss this. This is one reason why I recommend a therapeutic approach to developing leaders in Renaissance Leadership Odyssey, that we take the time to spend and allow a leader, a therapist, somebody who's qualified to work with that leader to help them understand who they are, how they're thinking, why they stay in the left brain so much versus the right brain, how to change that if they can or if they want to. And we have to understand and know that. And before we decide that, yeah, this is somebody who would make a good leader, we need to go deeper into that. We need to educate them in themselves and understanding themselves enough to know sort of what I call a psychological profile on this person. They also need to know how to effectively communicate, because everything that happens, everything that happens when there's more than one person involved begins and ends with interpersonal communication. Having the ability to control those processes we talked about earlier, to, to, to create a message, to understand how to sit down and think through and create a message that is really aimed at the other person. It is your message you want to send, but it's put in the other person's context so that they will be more receptive to hearing and understanding it, and maybe even open to doing what you ask. These are things you need to learn as a leader. It's deeper, it's a lot deeper than just, for example, active listening, being able to cite a behavior back to somebody to let them know you're listening. You don't want to just listen to them, you want to feel their emotions. You want to hear, you want to be able to learn how to feel those emotions. And that takes a pretty comprehensive amount of development and practice to become effective at over time. So that's the importance of interpersonal communication. I'll try to, I don't see anybody providing me much more questions. If you have a question, you can pop it up there. I'll be glad to answer it. Um, the Like I say, I didn't get uh, Parimal, I believe it is. I'm not really good with these with names too much, but I didn't get a chance to answer your question. If you can restate it, you can put it in the comments of this video. After you think about it and restate it for me, I'll try to get back to you on the answer to it. Self confidence comes pretty much in interactions with other people. So the more effective you are at interpersonal connections and interacting with other people, the more confident you're going to be within yourself. I can tell you that. Self-confidence, self-awareness, all those things don't happen in isolation. They're not all about going away and sitting down and going into a trance and thinking about yourself. They're most of the time associated with who you are and your values and structure with those around you and the context of what's going on around you. So self-awareness, self-confidence usually comes through interaction with others, and how that happens is very important because it can impact the self-confidence level. That's why it's always good to find somebody who knows really what they're talking about like this. I'm very strong about people looking for people who develop leaders and who are now leaders, who are now developing leaders, and who are in positions of a authority and capability and had a wide range of responsibilities. Though when you have developed somebody who can assume those, um, and you played a role in that. You may not have developed all of it, but you played a role in that. Um, uh, those are the kinds of people you want to get your information from. People who are knowledgeable, who look deeper than just a 2 hour course of something. Somebody who can talk to you about it on an ongoing basis and make you really see a difference in your actual work activity. I mean, there's got to be a result from any kind of development or activity that you put forth out there that should show us a distinct behavior change in you and consequently the people who work for you. That's normally where I look when I'm looking for where I can look and see and say, yeah, you're now making a difference. Is when I can sit there with their employees and talk to them, and they're telling me, yeah, he's doing this now, and this is so much better than it was before. Now we can do this, this, and this. Uh, the employees are where you're normally going to get your best measurement of success on this. It's not going to be a reassessments will tell you a lot, but I get a whole lot out of direct contact with the people who work for a person, where you can see it in their behavior. It's not just words. You can literally see it in their work behavior and how they view their work and everything they're doing. You can tell the difference between somebody who's got an effective leader who's continually communicating with their people and those that aren't. But interpersonal communication, obviously, the face-to-face, high frequency, ongoing interpersonal communication is the primary thing you want uh, in terms of helping people grow in leadership and getting better performance out of your people. Something that makes a difference for your employees and something that makes a difference for the organization, changes their engagement, changes their attitude towards leadership, changes their attitude towards the organization. Um, primary goals of any change process. Okay, I will let you go. Hope this proved helpful for you. It's my perspective on trust. It's how I've been able to build trust inside organizations, how I can actually pull together a full corporate transformation change process. You have to have trust to be able to do that. And you have to have trust within the organization to do that. So we spend a lot of time teaching those things before we even initiate a change process. And when we see it transitioning well where it's supposed to across the organization, then we can move into changing organizations and make things better for everybody. So hopefully that'll help you. Hopefully that'll help you cope with some of the issues you're dealing with today. If you have questions or you just want to chat, chats are free. I don't charge for chats. And unless we get into some sort of actual development contract, I'm open to sitting down and chatting with you about how you can make interpersonal communication more effective. I love talking about this stuff, obviously. So, if you have any questions, put them in the comments section, and I'll be glad to respond to them as much as possible. Um, Someday I may have, I don't know if I'm having any kind of impact on LinkedIn or not. I have tried every way I know to get that to work for me. It's not working, so I just don't mess with it much. You can find me on the Building Renaissance Leaders channel right there on YouTube. And normally you go straight in and it says live right there and on that program. So hopefully I got through on LinkedIn. I'll know when I get off and take a look. You have a nice evening.